Hello, everyone. My name is Vanessa Martin, and I'm studying at the University of the Western Cape in South Africa. I would like to welcome all Millennial Fellows, and if you could just kindly introduce yourself in the chat box, please include your name, the country you're from, and the university you're from. And I would also like to give a special warm welcome to our guest speaker, Judge Albie Sachs. He is a South African activist and a lawyer, a writer, and a former judge appointed by Nelson Mandela to serve on the first constitutional court of South Africa. Without wasting any further time, I would like to read a short biography of our guest speaker. Judge Albie Sachs is an activist and former judge on the Constitutional Court of South Africa from 1993 to 2009. He began practicing as an advocate at the Cape Bar at the age of 21, defending people charged under the racial statutes and security laws of apartheid. After being arrested and placed in solitary confinement over 5 months, Sachs went into exile in England, where he completed a PhD from Sussex University. And in 1988, he lost his right arm and his sight in one eye when a bomb was placed in his car in Maputo, Mozambique. After the bombing, he devoted himself to the preparations for a new democratic constitution for South Africa. When he returned home from exile, he served as a member of the Constitutional Committee and the National Executive of the African National Congress. He is the author of several books, including The Jail Diary of Albie Sachs, Soft Vengeance of a Freedom Fighter, The Strange Alchemy of Life and Law, and We, the People, Insides of an Activist Judge. His latest book is Oliver Tambo's Dream. Sachs has traveled to many countries, sharing his experiences in order to heal divided societies. I would like to welcome everybody again. And if there's anything I've left out, do you want to add anything else?
I think, thank you very much. There are lots of gaps. I'm pretty ancient, so I've been through quite a lot. And one of the interesting things is I was professor extraordinary at the University of Western Cape. And my documents that I brought back from exile are at the University of the Western Cape Library. So I have a very strong connection with your university. I'm very happy to be on this program. And I'm waiting, I'd say all ears, but my ears are covered by my headphones for the questions that I'm hoping you're going to throw my way. So it's over to you.
Okay. So before we start, I just want to ask if, as a freedom fighter, what was it that motivated you to continue fighting with such resilience? What was it that kept you going so as not to give up and to be able to continue to change the lives of people and do justice despite the tough battles you've been through?
I was part of a movement. I was part of a history. It wasn't just me, Albie, on his own, matter of conscience, taking a stand. I was born into it. Even my name, Albert, I was named after Albert Nzula, who was a freedom fighter. He was in the Communist Party. He was a trade union leader. He died short before I was born. My mother was the typist for Moses Kutani, who was the General Secretary of the Communist Party. So as a little child, my mother would say, tidy up, Uncle Moses is coming. And Uncle Moses was a black man whom she had enormous reverence for because he was her boss. So I grew up in that kind of a world, and the world dreaming of revolution, of change, a world where there was terrible injustice, not only in South Africa, but many parts of the world. I also grew up during World War II, when Hitler, Mussolini, Hirohito stood for racial domination in the world. And so this terrible war was happening, atomic bomb was dropped, millions of people are killed, the resistance movements in Europe, we learned very much about them, but also people struggling in South Africa against racism in my own country. So I was part of that culture. Even then, I'm growing up in white society, going to a school for whites only, living in a suburb for whites only. So in that sense, I had all the privileges that came with a white skin, but I had a bigger privilege to belong to a freedom movement, a freedom struggle, and to be received with open arms. If I believed in the ideas, the ideals for which people were struggling in the ANC, African National Congress, I was very, very welcome. So I didn't feel it was just me, Albie, taking a stand. I was part of this very wide movement, and it was an exciting movement, a joyous movement, a movement of intense, lively, spirited people who didn't just take the world and complain about the world. We were there to change the world, transform the world. At times, my spirits were very, very low. Solitary confinement was terrible. Total isolation, no one to speak to, you're not singing songs, you're not part of a movement. But I kind of hung in there. And then second time I was detained, tortured by sleep deprivation, collapsing on the floor, water poured on me. I half broke then, but I managed to kind of hang together. It wasn't a simple story of I'm strong, I'm brave, I will carry on. But I managed to somehow hold on. I still remember when I went to England in exile, and we would go to ANC meetings, and sometimes in a cold hall, everybody wearing overcoats, and the comrades would sing, because they said, and they'd raise their right arms. My arm didn't go up. This arm, I had a long arm then, didn't go up because I was defeated. It didn't have that spirit. And when I went to Mozambique, newly independent Mozambique in 1976, and I see Samora Machel and 70,000 people in Mashava Stadium, and Samora saying, Viva o povo unido of Maputo, long live the people of Mozambique, united from Rovuma to Maputo. 60,000 arms went up into the air, including my arm. So I mentioned that I had ups and downs. I got my courage back in Mozambique. Then I was blown up in Mozambique, and I saw the civil war in Mozambique. And that country is filled with people without arms, without legs from the landmines. And there was terrible civil war. And brother was fighting brother and sister was fighting sister. And in Mozambique, I learned the importance of a pluralist, open society. It wasn't enough that you were all fighting for the same things, for people's power, transform the country. There had to be space for opposition. And finally, coming back to South Africa, working with a very, very big team to draft the new constitution. And that was very healing for me, not just for South Africa, that I could feel now everything we'd fought for at that stage to bring down apartheid, create a non-racial, non-sexist democracy, we'd basically achieved that. So that also kept me going. But the spirit of people, the music, the movement, the sense of getting over the barriers that divided us, very, very powerful. And feeling we're part of the worldwide struggles against oppression, all of those things helped keep me going.
Okay, thank you very much. That was informative. But as we know that, like some of us, particularly South Africans in the Millennium Fellowship, will know your story. So for those that don't know, that are from around the world, can you please share a little bit of your life journey from the movement to end apartheid to your leadership with the Constitutional Court?
Right. So I'm growing up, white child in white-dominated South Africa. Only whites had the vote. Whites owned 87% of the land by law. Seats were segregated, reserved for whites. Beautiful homes, schools, hospitals for whites only. Black people could come as servants, as gardeners, as cooks. as childminders, but not as proud owners of homes in these white areas. We fought to bring that system down. And that system as a system, a legal system, we brought it down. People were predicting a racial bloodbath. They said it's impossible for black and white to live together as equals in one country. Whites only 10% of the population, only owning 87% of the land, and strutting around, dominating everything. But the leadership of people, not only Mandela, who's very well known, but people like Oliver Tambo, whom I worked very, very closely with, and Winnie Mandela, and Walter Sisulu, and Ahmed Kathrada, and many, many others, Joe Slovo, Ruth First, many, many people from different backgrounds, all in that one struggle to bring down apartheid and to get a new constitution. And we claim that we have maybe the most progressive constitution in the world. It's a wonderful document that opens the door for change, but it doesn't bring about change itself. And to bring about change has been very, very difficult, and many mistakes have been made. And we've had corrupt leaders, and we've had lots of things that are holding the people back and not providing the real equality that people are entitled to demand under the Constitution. But the Constitution provides the beacons and the instruments for change. Today, we're having elections for municipalities in South Africa. And our elections are very meaningful. They're free and they're fair, they're open. Maybe the results are not what everybody wants, but that's what elections mean. We have a very lively open press. People can speak their minds, they're not afraid. We have strong civil society, very powerful trade union movement, we have faith communities, employers' organizations, cultural groups, sporting groups. It's not just the state that controls everything. And the judiciary has played a particularly important role in South Africa. The old judges, at the time of change, we had 150 top judges. Do you know how many were black out of 150? 2. Do you know how many were women? 2. A slight variation from what our Constitution speaks about, non-racial, non-sexist. So we've transformed the judiciary. And now we have a judiciary that's held up by judges in many parts of the world as leading in terms of progressive ideas for transformation, social and economic rights, other rights of that kind, holding the president to account, denouncing corruption. Sadly, there's still huge inequality in our country, very much connected with race. Sadly, that's so. And sadly, we've had people in leadership positions who've abused their office. And that's why elections become so important, that there are opportunities to bring about real change. That's why it's so important to have a strong independent judiciary. That's why it's so important to have a lively press. That's why people like yourself at UWC, I like to believe you can speak your mind, you can campaign openly, you can criticize the leadership in the university, the national leadership. These are the things that give me lots of hope and courage for the future in South Africa, to use the rights that we've won through a very hard struggle.
Okay, so you said something about the Constitution. So my question is, would you say that South Africa's Constitution is still strong? You know, like you said, especially now because South Africa is still there's still inequality, and also with the corruption going on. So yeah, my question is, do you still think the Constitution is still strong, comparing it to back then? And also,
yes, not only to back then, to any constitution in the world. It's got social and economic rights. It's got rights for sexual minorities. We're the first constitution in the world to say it's unlawful to discriminate against people because of sexual orientation, 1996. And that constitution was adopted by Parliament, elected by the people. It wasn't made by lawyers. It wasn't a deal around a table. It's adopted through public discussion and debate. It's a constitution that has very strong environmental rights. It has very strong rights for women. It's a constitution that expressly says Freedom rights of the people include the rights not to be subjected to violence from the state or private sources. It's a constitutional matter. The Constitution gives women the right to choose termination of pregnancy. It's to make decisions on that. That's all in the Constitution. So it's a very progressive, forward-looking Constitution. The problem is it hasn't been used sufficiently. It's not the failure of the Constitution. It's the failure of the people to use their rights, of political leadership, to invoke the possibilities that the Constitution has created.
Okay. So do you think, because is there a way we can solve or change that? Or since it's it's not the Constitution that's the problem, but it's the people. Is there something that can be done to transform that?
Well, one of the things is for people to be fully aware of their constitutional rights. And that should come from the political parties, but especially from civil society. Something that we're doing on Constitution Hill, where we've collected a lot of information about how the Constitution was made, and also information on the Bill of Rights and the rights that people have. And so now the Constitutional Hill Trust, on which I'm one of the board members, we are communicating these rights. We're making them available through animation, through a whole variety of different means. We've had a timeline on the struggles of women for their rights, going back quite far into our history, from the 19th century, the 20th century, present century, women in Umkhonto we Sizwe, women in the resistance, women in the trade union movement. We've also got a timeline on the queer community and the rights of the queer community for their struggles. So that information, we're getting it out, and people must mobilize and use the rights that they have.
Thank you very much. And what do you think is our role as young leaders to achieve justice and peace at the same time? And what are the tools that you would consider most important to be willing to dedicate a life of social impact to change the status quo for the benefit of the community?
Well, I would say there may be three areas. The one most obvious one is to become politically active. And that'll be your choice, where you go. It could be in the ANC. Most of my life was in the ANC. I was literally willing to give my life for the ANC. It could be the EFF. You might feel they represent what you want. It could be the Democratic Alliance, the DA in South Africa. There are lots of other small groups. It could be as an independent and setting up independent groups. So that's one area. Another area is civil society, and that's very vast. And it could be women's movement, it could be queer community, it could be the trade union movement, very, very active in South Africa. It could be in cultural literary associations. We have great poets, we have great singers. It could be through writing. And the third is just in your world. It might be through science. It might be through healing. It might be through teaching. Gosh, we need good teachers, inspiring teachers. There are multiple different ways. It might be just in your own imagination, in your own neighborhood, in your own family. Some people are, if you like, born for, they crave, they love public life. They love being out there, speaking, engaging, and so on. Others hate that. They're much more interior. So you don't have to feel because I'm interior, I'm a quiet person, there's nothing for me. You use your interiority, if there's such a word, in ways that are meaningful, that are rich, to connect up with the world around you. What we had always was a certain core sense of optimism, that human beings can be better, that we can transform our world. And the one thing I hope never happens is for young people to become cynical and despairing about the world. That you can be angry, you can be rude. People have been very rude to me, my generation. That's life. That's life. I'd far rather that they're rude, but speaking their minds, than that they're cowed and quiet and feel suppressed. or so cynical, they're not even willing to be rude to people like me.
Thank you very much. So you've spent decades fighting for other people's rights, for the idea of justice and equality. Do you feel now, looking back at all the work and the struggle and the pain, was it worth it? Do you think we are closer to achieving equality and justice as a global community than we were 2 to 3 decades ago?
Yeah. Can I just reformulate the opening comment that you made, fighting for other people's rights? I remember I was on a tour, this is now 30 years ago, more, maybe 40 years ago, in the US, and I was in St. Louis, Kentucky, and I remember it was upstairs, and I gave a talk about apartheid and how terrible it was, and we can get a non-racial democracy. Nobody believed me. They were sure there would be bloodbath, that people couldn't live together in one country. And then quiet afterwards, and then a young guy comes up with his hands in his jeans, and he's saying, I'm not going to seriously try the Midwest American accent, but my big brother says the problem with people like you, you're always trying to liberate somebody else. What you should be doing is liberate yourself. And I think what he meant was you liberate yourself by smoking a certain weed, and he was anti-political. And I thought, I'm not fighting to liberate someone else. I'm fighting for myself, my right to live in a free country, my dignity. And I'm fighting alongside the oppressed people, not fighting for them, alongside them. And it made for a very beautiful connection and relationship. And, looking back, we achieved huge things, not small things. Apartheid was everywhere. It was total, utter imposing indignities on the great majority based on pure racist arrogance. We brought down that system. We destroyed that system. We got the franchise for everybody. We got the right to speak their minds. We got the right for you to be at UWC if you want, or UWC then was the Bush College. You had to go there. You couldn't go to other places. Now you can choose where to go. You're comfortable there, it's great. And to have possibilities that couldn't have existed before. So that's been huge, and I have no regrets whatsoever. Secondly, we got a beautiful constitution. As a lawyer, that means a lot to me. Thirdly, we've got a great constitutional court. That also means a lot to me. The decisions of the South African Constitutional Court are cited by judges all over the world. In Kenya, in Canada, in Germany, the European Court of Human Rights, they all cite our decisions. And it's a source of great pride to me. Out of our pain, out of our idealism and hope, we've crafted legal decisions now that are going around the world. When I see the continuing violence in this country, the continuing inequality, when I see the racism that's still there, I feel deep pain. But of course it was worth it, because we've got as far as we've got. And now we've got to use the instruments we fought so hard for. Use the vote, use our freedom of speech, use the courts, use our freedom to mobilize, to demonstrate peacefully, use our access to education to get the next phase of transformation and change. So I was an optimist, even in the worst of times, even when my arm wouldn't go up to shout Viva or Nkosi Sikeleli, it wouldn't go up. I never lost that deep, deep optimism. And I'm meeting so many young people, like yourself, Vanessa. You're not unique. I hope you don't mind my saying you're not unique. In fact, I hope you feel pleased I'm saying you're not unique, because there are so many people like you who are questioning, who are warm, who are idealistic, who are hopeful, who want to see change. And when I look into your eyes, it's just into a screen. I don't see, how can I become rich? How can I be powerful? how can I strut around? I see somebody who's thoughtful, who's humane, who's challenging, asking questions. And as I say, you're not unique. In fact, I think you are even the majority. So in that sense, we've achieved a huge amount. Now your generation must take everything forward to be as challenging, as cheeky, as irreverent as we were. Because we were very challenging and cheeky and irreverent as young people. We listened to the old people. We could learn a lot from them, but we had to chart our own paths, and you've got to chart your own path.
Thank you very much, Judge. So we're going to be moving on to a Q&A with the Millennial Fellows. If you guys have any question, please do jot your questions down in the chat box. If you would like to, please raise your hand if you have a question, and the team will unmute you. But I see here we already have questions. And I would like to read the first question from, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Malavika Kannan from Sciences. She's from Paris. She says that given that the South American Constitution came in a post-colonial setting, it is inevitable that it still has some of its laws, like property laws, inspired by the colonial period. So apart from apartheid laws and racial laws, so do you think these inspired laws from the colonial era in South African Constitution are pertinent even today, or do these need to change too?
Oh, you're absolutely right. We had a law dealing with compensation for expropriated property from 1977. And that was based on willing seller, willing buyer, market prices, very protective of private property. That law's been changed now. That had to be changed. There are other laws. We had a law going back quite a long time, and even the post-apartheid era, dealing with the claim for work injury compensation for domestic workers. They were excluded from the law. So there's a law now providing for an insurance fund for compensation for workers in factories, in mines, even on farms, but not for domestic workers. And the Constitutional Court said that's unconstitutional. It deals with the intersectionality of women, because domestic workers are overwhelmingly women, Black women overwhelmingly, and poor Black women. And those intersections meant this was now indirect discrimination against those women, not just because they were workers, not just because they were Black, not just because they were women, but the intersection, the combination of all three. And now that law has to be changed. And there are many other laws like that that have to be changed. But by and large, the vicious racist laws have been scrapped by the Constitution directly or indirectly subsequently. Gender discrimination, discrimination against disabled people is often indirect. A lot of that has been dealt with. Discrimination against the queer community is discrimination through rendering people invisible, not recognizing their right to be different. That's been dealt with very much by the courts and to some extent by legislation. So the problem is not so much the laws. It's the daily conduct, its actions, and something that pleases me is these things are out in the open. They declared, they revealed, they denounced. Even the corruption is declared and denounced. It's not accepted as acceptable as normal. And so these things give me hope that those aspects will be dealt with.
Thank you, Judge. So we have another interesting question here by Denise van Heerden. She's asking, what was your favorite part about being a constitutional court judge?
I loved everything about it. I loved putting on my gown and coming into the court because the building was so beautiful. I loved the argument from counsel. I loved those issues that seemed impossible in finding solution. I loved the discussions with my colleagues. Maybe that was the best part. Sitting around the table, going round and round and round like a workshop, interacting with each other. That was very, very special. I loved working with my law clerks, who were people like yourselves, your generation, working with us, full of idealism and hope. I loved making the work late into the night and feel proud that they're working late into the night. The worst kind of slave driver who makes a slave even feel happy to be a slave, but a slave to justice, a slave to putting your heart and soul and energy into something you believe in voluntarily. They didn't have to do it, but feeling that excitement that I'd felt in the underground, in the resistance, the struggle, now in formulating the different aspects of the law. I loved it when I got the phrases just right, when it came out just right. Those were some of the greatest moments. I loved hearing the advocates standing up, each one different, each one a personality, posing questions, seeing how they responded. For me, it was a glorious 15 years of my life. Painful, lonely at times, difficult, complicated, but basically very, very glorious. Always on the side of dignity. The key words in our Constitution were human dignity, equality, freedom. In that order, not freedom first, which is freedom first means freedom for the powerful, for the rich. We didn't want it first. Human dignity is first, equality second, freedom is third, but all interconnected. I loved even our building. We got wonderful artwork in our building. And something that might interest people from Mexico is in the 1950s, when I was in the youth movement in Cape Town, we were introduced to the great Mexican muralists, Siqueiros and Orozco and Diego Rivera. And we painted a mural in our club. The police came and painted it out. When I went to Mozambique in exile years later, we were painting murals everywhere. And then we ran out of paint. And now on the Constitutional Court, I was asked with the Justice Yvonne Mokgoro to look after decor. And with decor, that simple theme, we got a design for a beautiful building. Justice under a tree is the theme of our building. It's open, it's filled with art. It's not the blindfolded lady with the scales of justice. It's pictures of humanity, it's tapestries, it's sculpture, artists from all sorts of different backgrounds, and a very, very beautiful building. And there was scope for our imagination, connecting art and justice. So thank you, Mexico, for having given us that initial ideas of art not just being something for either cathedrals or for private collectors, but something for public buildings.
Thank you. We have another question here from Billy Abraham. Billy, if you're still here, can you just unmute yourself and ask your question? Please introduce yourself and the university you're from.
Can you send it in writing if he prefers?
Okay, I will then just read Billy Abrams' question. It says, hello, Judge. I am a Kenyan, and a while back, you had the opportunity to sit in the Kenya's Judges and Magistrates Board. You had the opportunity to evaluate the suitability or otherwise of these judges and magistrates to continue serving. So what would be your general opinion arising out of that process? And today, most Kenyans still complain about the judicial corruption and case backlog. I think it's two questions. So the second is, what is that our Kenyan judiciary is not getting right based on your past engagements in the earlier alluded capacity. Sorry.
Right. I spent 18 months in Kenya, a member of the Kenyan Judges and Magistrates Vetting Board, an extraordinary period of my life. There were 3 Commonwealth judges. I was one of them. 3 Kenyan lawyers, 3 Kenyan non-lawyers. And we had to vet every single judge and magistrate to see if they were suitable to stay on the in my time, I think it was something like 9 out of 50, we said no, but they were mainly the top judges. It was very painful, very difficult. But I think it did make a huge difference in Kenya compared to what it was before. And you had some judges like William Matunga. He's one of the great judges of the world as Chief Justice. Outstanding. A book of his is going to come out later this year of his speeches. A very pioneering judge, very honest. He'd been in jail himself, wrongly imprisoned during the period of one-party rule. Recently, the judiciary has given very strong opinions preventing purported amendments that would have changed the Constitution very, very dramatically, has struck down those amendments. Very brave. Whether you agree with it or not, it's showing a very independent judiciary. Has the judiciary been cleansed of corruption? I don't know. Are there still delays? It looks like there are still delays, but I don't think they are as severe as they were before. What brought about the change was popular mobilization, denouncing the misconduct of the judges, which resulted in sections in the Constitution to have a clean and honest judiciary. And I think the Kenyan Constitution provides very powerful instruments to take action against judges who are not conducting themselves properly.
Thank you very much. There is, I think, Nthembe Mwanza wants to ask Judge a question. Nthembe?
Can I just say, based on previous experience, it's usually better to read the questions.
Okay.
Sometimes people find it awkward, embarrassing. Sometimes people carry on talking for a long time because they're nervous or this is their time.
Hello. I just wanted to ask the judge how he was able to overcome discouraging moments, especially if he's like if he set up a plan and his plans failed, and how he was able to, what he would do to recuperate and start over, and if he ever did ever leave certain projects unfinished, especially if they failed.
Gosh, I failed in quite a lot of things in life at different stages. And I suppose I've succeeded in quite a lot of things. I have one little thing that I tell myself, Albie, don't put all your eggs in one basket of happiness and achievement. Then I changed from a basket and eggs to the idea of a juggler. Keep 4 or 5 balls going up in the air so that if there's one disappointment, there's something else that you're involved with that can keep going. And things don't always work out at the same time. So have different interests going on at the same time. Diversify yourself in that sense. And then there's always something that's coming off well. I found that's helped me quite a lot. One year, I remember I was in Mozambique and I was feeling, generally when I was in England, I was unhappy even when I was happy. I met wonderful people, powerful anti-apartheid movement. I felt really exiled, far away. Generally in Mozambique, even when I was unhappy, I felt happy. I was close to home. And I felt the transformations and the change and so on. But I had dark periods in Mozambique. And I remember one year, they would say, this is the year of mobilization to collect cashew nuts. This is the year when we're going to transform this, that, and the other. I said, Albie, this is going to be your year of happiness. And it sounds weird. You can't command happiness. But I decided on day one, I'm going to be happy. And if something happened that made me unhappy, too bad, not important. Day 2, day 3, by day 5, little things were not getting me down. And I think that's one of the keys, not to allow little things to become part and parcel of a huge pile of disappointments. Ignore them, let them pass, see your way through, get on to the things that make you happy, that give you a sense of reward. This has got nothing to do with politics as such. It's got nothing to do with law as such. It's got to do with maybe a human being navigating the world. Diversify your interests. Don't pin all your hopes on one particular thing or one particular person or one particular relationship or one institution. Have lots of things going, and then some of them will come through.
Thank you. I see we also have a question from Malavika. She has her hand raised. Malavika, you can please introduce yourself, your university, and the country you're from.
Thank you very much. I'm Malavika from Sciences Po in France. Honorable Justice, thank you for joining us today. I just have one other question, which I think will be relevant for all of us as fellows as well. As somebody who has been judging people, who are not the same who don't have the same background as you, which is very similar to all of us reaching out to beneficiaries who don't have a similar background of ourselves. How do you feel we can best keep our preconceived notions and prejudice aside and handle people in a very in a way where our personal biases don't affect them? Because be it in the court or be it outside, I think this is extremely relevant point, and coming from you would be amazing. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. And it's a super duper question. Very, very real. Because our country is so different in terms of appearance, background, culture, beliefs, everything. Very, very diverse. And we want a set of core values. So 1993, I thought it was 1991, I'm driving to the center of Cape Town and I'm sweating. I'm sweating because it's November, it's hot. I'm sweating because I'm driving with one hand. I lost my other arm to a bomb put in my car by Southern security agents. I'm sweating because I'm not used to driving. I've just got a car. I'm sweating because I don't know Cape Town well. I've been 24 years in exile. But I'm sweating mainly because I'm going to go on a gay pride march. And I'm feeling uncomfortable. And I'm driving. I get to town. And I see the people coming towards me. I'm late. And there's a poster. It says, "Suck, don't swallow." Oh, my God, I think. I'm going to be in the newspaper tomorrow. And then I feel ashamed of myself, that I'm embarrassed that I'm going on a gay pride march, that I want a poster saying "Straights for Gays." I park the car, I join in, and I march next to Professor Edwin Cameron, who also became a judge on the Constitutional Court afterwards. And I felt fantastic. I felt proud of myself. I'd crossed over from that awkwardness. And I marched with the gay and lesbian people to support their claim to dignity and equality in South Africa. 10 years later, I'm sent by the Chief Justice to a group called Christian Lawyers in Africa to open the annual conference. I'm not sweating because it's cool, but I'm thinking, now what can I say to them? And I come into the hall and I love the costumes. It's nothing like African costume diversity, feeling of a whole continent there. And I'm thinking, what can I say to them? And I tell them the story of taking the oath. Now, I grew up in a very secular home. My parents fought their parents over religion. And it was very tough on me, being called a heathen at school, being looked at as an outsider because I didn't pretend a belief. But I said, to pretend a belief I don't have is dishonorable to me, but also dishonorable to God if God exists. And I'm praying to a God I don't believe in. It made me very respectful of conscience, whatever the conscience is, of other people's views. So I tell the story of taking the oath, and you can swear to God, you raise your right arm and say, so help me God, to become a judge, or you can just say, I affirm. And Sachs, my name is last, I'm watching my colleagues, and most swear using a different language of the country, and some affirm. And I want to affirm, but I want to raise my right arm. It's the arm of sacrifice. It reminds me of my comrades who died in the struggle. And I raise my right arm now, so that I have to raise my right arm. I have to say, so help me God. And I said, so help me God. And the Christian lawyers from Africa stood up and they cheered. And the next day they came for a tour of the court, this beautiful building with this wonderful artwork, built in the heart of a prison where both Gandhi, Mandela, and others were locked up. Now that's where we have our court, transforming negativity into positivity, oppression into hope. And they loved the tour. And I have to leave because I have another meeting. And they say, no, we must say a prayer. So they're saying a prayer, and it's a long prayer. You know, some prayers go around the world a few times. And I'm about to run off, and they say, no, we must lay on hands. 70 pairs of hands takes a long time. But I received it with love because they were giving it with love. Although I am secular and they are very religious. So when it came to writing the decision in the same-sex marriages case, I wasn't consciously thinking of both groups, the gay pride marchers and the Christian Lawyers for Africa. But in the back of my mind, how can I write a judgment that both sides, if you like, will accept as acknowledging where they stand, acknowledging their different views, not my views, imposing my views. And I developed the theory of the coexistence between the sacred and the secular. It's not the sacred is fighting the secular fighting the sacred. If the one wins, the other loses. It's not a cultural war between two different groups in society. It's getting the balance right and reserving for the sacred a space for belief, and not just belief and prayer, but to go around in public, participating in public life with your beliefs quite openly and publicly. At the same time, you can't impose your beliefs on others who don't share in those beliefs in a way that denies them, in this case, gay men and lesbian women, the right to express, articulate their love, mutual responsibilities for each other with public acknowledgement. So a large portion of the judgment was about the importance of religion in public life. And afterwards, the South African Council of Churches called it a Solomonian judgment. Now, my dad happened to be Solomon, so I was very pleased it was Solomonian. But what it meant was an even-handed judgment that acknowledged how important religion was for religious people, and saying the law can't be used to compel them. The ministers, the imams, the rabbis, and others, the pastors, to perform same-sex marriages if it was against their religious beliefs. That they can't be compelled to do that. But at the same time, those religious beliefs can't be binding on the state and people in public life. And so that's an example, a very particular case. We are not neutral as judges. We are not neutral. We are impartial. The Constitution is not neutral. It's not neutral on racism. It's not neutral on sexism. It's not neutral on treating disabled people as though somehow they're stupid or dumb. It's not neutral on a whole range of questions like that. It takes a stand. You have to take a stand. But it listens to everybody. It listens to everybody. It doesn't come into court with its mind made up. We don't come into court with our minds made up one way or the other. We're open to debate, discussion, argument, using the Constitution as the prism. And on the court, we had myself from a Jewish background, we had Zach Yakub from Muslim background, we had Jan Krichler from a Christian background, Arthur Chaskelson, Jewish background. It didn't matter what our backgrounds were. It didn't matter what our particular views in relation to the deity were. It didn't matter whether we'd been political or who we'd voted for. All of us were anti-apartheid, that we had to be. All of us liked to think we were gender sensitive, that we had to be, to swear to the oath to the Constitution. But we could wholeheartedly support the Constitution. With our different backgrounds, the Constitution was the equalizing, if you like, intellectually equalizing prism through which our thought had to pass, that could allow believers and non-believers and activists and non-activists to come together, to have unanimous opinions in most of our cases, and to give reasons for our dissent in other cases.
Thank you very much, Judge. I think today's webinar was very inspiring to a lot of us Millennium Fellows and the other guests. Think it's time to wrap up our conversation. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask if you have any inspiring words for us Millennium Fellows in terms of implementing or trying to how to go about social changes, and what social the core values we can use to implement social change.
You know, just thinking about that question, for me the key is an intense sense of yourself, your conscience, your beliefs, the importance of them. It's very, very subjective, very personal, but at the same time, the capacity to connect up with others, to be part of the wider community. And we have a concept which, Vanessa, you would know only too well, that I think brings together the importance of each individual with the importance of community, and we call it Ubuntu in South Africa. That I am a person through recognizing that you're a person, and I don't diminish my personhood by respecting your personhood. I enhance my personhood. I learn from sharing with others, and I learn from respecting others and sharing things with others. And I think it's a marvelous concept. In my legal practice way back, and I can go back to the 1950s even, and there would be poor Black men and women would come to my office, the lawyer's office, and the way they shared so much amongst themselves. It's not something you learn in a church or a school or to pass exams. It's something you learn in life, a solidarity, particularly amongst the poor, that you get on better by recognizing and working with others. And I think one of the sad things in the world of the millenniums is you're all told to go out and become rich and become powerful and become important. And I think that's terrible advice. It's terrible advice. If it was go out, maybe you'll become rich, maybe you'll become powerful, maybe you'll become important. That's a byproduct. The real product is a certain internal quality of a sense of connection with life, of love of other people, curiosity about things that are happening, sharing, working together. That's much richer than all the wealth in the world. And one has to maybe fight against the pressures to be greedy, to be ambitious, to be self-seeking, and say, that's not important for me. That's not what I really want. I want to get on. I want to shine. Okay, that's fine. I want to do well. That's wonderful. But I want to do well together with others, not competing with others, not fighting against others. If you can get that, that becomes almost habitual. you'll enjoy life more, and you're far more likely to achieve the things that you want. If you want to become a super duper trillionaire and become richer than Elon Musk, who's now richer than than Bezos, I've got no advice to offer you whatsoever. If you want that richness of something inside yourself that's meaningful and loving, that's the advice that I would offer you.
Thank you very much, Judge Albie Sachs, for joining and attending this webinar. I would also like to thank all Millennium Fellows for attending and taking the time to watch this webinar. I think this is the end. I'm saddened by this because there's a lot of history and inspiring history that you shared with us, sir. And I would really, from the bottom of my heart, say I'm very thankful even for this opportunity to have conversate with you. And this conversation was very informative. Thank you to everybody. And this is, I guess, the end of our meeting.
Bye, guys.
Bye.